Once I heard a friend of D.D. Kugler say that many years before he used to send Kugler reviews of imaginary shows. Kugler was living in a distant fishing village, so he never knew the productions didn't exist. He would write back with his thoughts and they'd debate. When he heard the truth, Kugler didn't seem to mind. He said he thought of that correspondence as an important part of his artistic development. The exchange is what seemed to matter most. Is there anyone more like himself than D.D. Kugler? There are many telling details. He was born in a town called Superior, Nebraska. He's the son of a preacher man. In 1969, during the Vietnam War, Kugler did a subtle analysis of his situation. And he decided that though he might fight in some wars, he wouldn't fight in that one. So he fled the draft and came to Canada. He read Kafka in an attic in Toronto. He studied Melville on the prairies. He worked as a fisherman on the south shore of Nova Scotia and was drawn into theater in his 30s. It was a community production of The Sound of Music. He played a Nazi. Kugler has always, it seemed, been exactly Kugler. Back in the days of snail mail, he never wrote letters. He sent postcards, which he typed. They read like telegrams long before telegrams, email before email. His style has never changed. Staccato fragments punctuated by ... dots. And well before smartphones, Kugler had a device that beeped when the Blue Jays got a run on base. It's true. In fringe lineups, he'd wear it on a lanyard around his neck, together with a tiny fringe schedule and map that he would make to help maximize the number of plays he could see in one day. Kugler once divulged that he seriously considered rotating the spoons in his cutlery drawer because it struck him as sort of out of balance that only the ones on top got used. Even the way Kugler looks never seems to change. You know, his bald head, his big hands, his little glasses, those shining brown eyes. A collision of ellipses, intersecting like geometry, always in motion, always so sure. After his MFA in directing at York, Richard Gross hired Kugler as the dramaturg at Necessary Angel in Toronto, where he stayed from 1985 to 1993. They updated the Casanova story for the AIDS era in a play called New House. They adapted Timothy Findley's Not Wanted on the Voyage. They did a stage version of Adachi's Coming Through Slaughter. These shows smashed dramatic convention to pieces. They were ambitious, epic stories refracted through a vivid contemporary sensibility. From 93 to 98, Kugler was artistic director of Northern Light Theatre in Edmonton, Alberta. And he rewrote the mandate to include this beautiful phrase, provocative scripts, language-rich texts that are dark, poetic, funny. And he did Howard Barker in the Bus Barn, Daniel McIver in a Gay Bar. He did a play about a chef's last meal, complete with food for the audience. For one staged reading, the actors sat around a table of sand lit by hundreds of white candles. And I still remember his production of Seven Lears at the local college. The audience was nestled in a grove of willow trees. You could smell the sap. His shows in Edmonton blasted our notions of what was possible in the theatre. I am one of the many who were there at that time who would say that those productions changed us. Kugler's a longtime member of the LMDA, and he was our first Canadian president from 2000 to 2002. Throughout his career, he's freelanced as a director and dramaturg of plays, opera, and dance. And since '98, his baseline gig has been at Simon Fraser University, where he is professor in the theatre area of the School for Contemporary Arts. He's currently associate dean, and he told me today that he's 10 months into his 36-month term. So 10 months and 2 weeks into his 36-month term. He's keeping track. In 2010, Kugler received an award for excellence in teaching. Now, as a prof, Kugler combines rigor and generosity. There's a quiz every single class, forcing the students to remember seemingly unimportant details of the script. For Kugler, these minutiae are far from trivial. Rather, they are metonyms, telling little details that reveal the whole. He values people as much as he values the text, so he quizzes the students on the names of their classmates, too. He grades the students very highly for speaking up against what he calls the stream of consensus. For Kugler, consensus is the enemy of art. There are very many of us whose paths have been radically rerouted because we encountered Kugler. Though I never did take a class with him, I am one of those people. My first job in the theater was a summer internship at Northern Light in Edmonton. And my task was, it's very awkward. My task at the time was to sort through boxes in the basement, recataloguing old show reports and crumbling newspapers. And late one afternoon, Kugler came out of his office. He took off his glasses and rubbed his head. "Have a look at my Canada Council grant," he said. "I'd like your thoughts." Now, I must have been surprised, but I was so ignorant and so arrogant that I covered his 9 pages in red pen. "Too opaque," I wrote. "Too many juxtapositions. And what's with all the ... dots? Kugler stared at me for one short moment. Then he sat down in that dusty basement and we worked through his grant together, line by line. He hired me as a reader, a blurb writer, a curator, an assistant director, a collaborator, a programmer, an artistic confidant. And along the way, he taught me the word for all that, dramaturgy. That is exactly Kugler. He sees what you can be when you didn't know. He names it, you're surprised. He gets you to do it, you try. You're his student, an apprentice, suddenly a colleague. Flash. All in one short moment, one glance of those bright brown eyes. I wish I could fill the night air with words of praise for Kugler. Here's the man, I want to say. Here are his accomplishments, his virtues, his contradictions. This is what I admire about him, I would shout to those stars in Walt Whitman's poem. Here is what I love. But Kugler wouldn't like that. It would wreck the perfect silence, and like the character in the poem, he would slip away. His modesty is as ferocious as his dramaturgy. He said to me, "Please keep it short." Fine then. Just this, Kugler, I hope you know that what Jeff said is very true. As a teacher, a director, a dramaturg, an artist, a colleague, a friend, your gift is the leap, the radical leap of faith. You unleash a serious, joyous, terrible, and terrific energy. I've seen it and I've felt it. It's a fact. It's an undeniable fact that reveals the whole. Ladies and gentlemen, the recipient of the Gotthold Lessing Award for a Lifetime of Achievement in the field of dramaturgy, my colleague and friend, Didi Kugler.